Sometimes a single joke changes the direction of two lives. Sometimes a thing lost in the dirt becomes the reason two strangers stop running from the world. And sometimes, in the wide silence of the frontier, fate answers when no one is asking. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The day was slipping away when Adam Mercer guided his horse across the open flats bordering Red Valley. The sun leaned low behind a jagged ridge of stone, its light thinning into long, slanted bands that washed the land in muted gold. Fence posts softened at the edges, scrub brush blurred into shadow, and the earth itself seemed to exhale as the heat loosened its grip. Adam rode with the easy balance of a man who had spent more years in the saddle than anywhere else. His horse moved at a tired but reliable gait, hooves stirring pale dust that drifted behind them in quiet, unhurried trails. He had spent the afternoon at the trading post, collecting necessities rather than luxuries. Wire for repairs, lamp oil, a new rasp for the horse's hooves. Nothing extra, nothing indulgent. Adam preferred to be home before nightfall. There were chickens to shut in, gates to check, a barn to lock. The routines mattered. They kept his thoughts ordered, his days predictable. Predictability was something people had taken from him long ago, and he did not intend to lose it again. Years earlier, violence had ripped his life apart in a nearby town. A dispute that ended with his brother dead, and Adam no longer welcome among people who once called him neighbor. He never explained what happened, not fully, not to anyone. Since then he kept to a patch of dry land, where no one expected conversation and no one asked questions. His purpose had narrowed to something simple and survivable: keep the ranch standing, keep himself out of trouble, and keep his distance from pain that didn't belong to him. As he approached the yard, Adam noticed movement near the water trough. He drew the reins and slowed the horse, his posture tightening without conscious thought. A woman knelt in the dirt, palms pressed flat against the ground, fingers combing through packed soil with careful, urgent strokes. Her long black hair hung loose, strands clinging to dust at the ends. The dress she wore was practical rather than decorative, marked with beadwork and fringe, meant for travel, not ceremony. She didn't appear injured, but exhaustion sat heavy in her posture, the kind that came from days of walking while never fully relaxing. Adam stopped several yards away and let the horse settle. He watched her in silence, weighing what he saw. People had wandered onto his land before, some desperate, some hungry, a few dangerous. This woman fit none of the patterns he knew. She wasn't begging. She wasn't hiding. She was focused with a concentration so intense he wondered if she had even noticed him. When she finally lifted her head, their eyes met. Hers was steady but guarded, dark with restraint rather than panic. She didn't scramble to her feet. She didn't reach for a weapon. She simply held his gaze and breathed, with the measured control of someone who had learned not to show fear, even when it burned hot beneath the ribs. When she spoke, her voice was dry and low. She said she had lost a ring. Then, with a strained attempt at humor that didn't quite land, she added that any man who found it would earn her as a wife. The words were meant as a joke, a shield to mask desperation, but the tightness behind them was unmistakable. Adam neither laughed nor bristled. He understood that tone. People used it when pretending things weren't as bad as they were. Instead of answering, he loosened the reins, stepped down from the saddle and walked toward her. His boots pressed into the dirt with slow, deliberate weight as he crouched beside her, careful not to crowd her space. Her eyes flicked briefly to his hands, waiting to see what he would do. Adam didn't touch her. He didn't ask questions. He placed his fingers against the ground and began pushing, aside loose dirt with steady, unhurried movements. He had no clear reason for helping, except that something in her voice echoed a loss he carried himself. She watched him in return, her mind racing beneath a controlled exterior. She wondered if he expected payment, if he saw opportunity, if he was measuring whether she was worth trouble. She had left a hostile camp 2 days earlier after tensions turned, sharp and dangerous. Her food would last one more evening at most. She didn't know this territory well enough to guess who might offer shelter and who might offer harm. The ring she searched for had belonged to her mother, the last thing she carried from a life already gone. Losing it in the dust felt like losing the final thread tying her to someone who had once loved her without conditions. Adam worked without speaking, brushing aside clumps of soil and bits of gravel. His focus stayed on the ground, but his awareness stretched outward. He listened to the rhythm of her breathing, the slight shift of her weight, the tension she tried to hide. After several minutes, his fingertips struck something cool beneath the surface. He pinched the object gently and lifted it free, revealing a thin silver band dulled by dirt. The moment she saw it, her body went still. Her chest tightened as if the air had been knocked from her lungs. Adam didn't rush to hand it to her. He held it out on an open palm, far enough away that she could take it without stepping closer. She reached slowly, her hand trembling once before she closed her fingers around the ring. She lowered her gaze, studying it as if needing proof it was real. Adam rose carefully and gestured toward the trough, offering water without words. She hesitated, not because she didn't want it, but because kindness almost always came with conditions. When he stepped back to give her room, the hesitation eased. She cupped water in her hands and drank in small, controlled sips. The cold soothed her throat, still raw from long travel. Adam gathered a few pieces of wood from a nearby pile and returned to the center of the yard. She watched as he struck flint against kindling and coaxed a modest fire to life. He didn't tell her to sit. He didn't ask for anything in return. Turning people away into the night was not something he did unless they gave him reason. She weighed her options in silence. Fatigue trembled in her legs when she shifted. The land grew colder quickly after sundown, and sleeping without fire meant waking stiff and weak. Staying near a stranger carried its own risks. She studied his posture as he sat near the flames, shoulders slightly hunched, as if always prepared for confrontation but never inviting it. He didn't stare at her. He didn't wait for her reaction. His stillness felt safer than forced hospitality. She stepped closer to the fire and lowered herself to the ground at its edge. Warmth crept into her back slowly. Her hands folded in her lap, fingers brushing the ring to reassure herself it hadn't vanished again. Adam tore a strip of dried meat and set it near her. She glanced at him, searching for expectation. There was none. He watched the flames, his thoughts drifting through the quiet he had built for himself. For the first time in days, her breathing slowed. She stayed alert, but the fear that had clung to her since leaving the camp loosened its grip. Silence settled between them. Not strained, not empty. She had known men who filled silence with words to assert control. Adam allowed it to exist. As the sky deepened from orange to blue, coyotes cried somewhere beyond the property line. Adam added another log. She shifted slightly closer, not enough to signal trust, but enough to show she wasn't preparing to flee. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Both understood how rare it was to sit beside a stranger and feel less threatened than alone. By the time night fully claimed the flats, one truth had already formed for both of them. Their presence beside that fire was not an accident. It was the beginning of something neither had planned to find. At dawn, Naeli tied the silver ring securely at her throat and stood beside Adam as light spilled across the valley. She understood then that the joke she had made was no joke at all, not to fate. Adam did not claim her, did not bind her with words or promises. Instead, he offered something rarer, choice. She chose to stay, not because she owed him, but because beside him, she felt seen without being owned. In the quiet rhythm of shared work and unspoken understanding, two broken paths became one steady road forward.